Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay, yeah.
the goal of splines is to get from point A to point B. Let me draw the 2 points. One of them is A, one of them is B.
Wow.
I
It should
can't
be
see
the
the
A
point.
emoji and the B emoji.
I can't really see the point.
Oh, could you pass me my charger?
Is it great if we like pull up the
No,
board
this
for a
is
second
yours.
while we do this,
That's
and then
my
we can
charger.
like.
Can I?
Once,
Go ahead.
I love how you rolled it up and then you extended it again.
In 2017, we started working on this because, similar to this year, although more pronounced, the game objective was to put gears on a peg. A peg looked like this. We had an airship, and on it was a peg, and we had to put a gear on it. If our robot was here, our normal way of aligning would be to turn. If our robot was like, this is our robot, facing this way. Our normal way of aligning would be to figure out where the peg is using vision, turn to it, and then we turn this way, and then we just drive forward, and then drop the peg. However, that doesn't work with pegs, because if you drop your gear here, it's not going to stay on the peg. To drop a gear on the peg, you have to come in from this direction, and you have to be aligned to it in the correct position and in the correct orientation. So to get here, you have to do some sort of curvy turning and driving at the same time. Or I mean, you could do a really dumb thing, which is like this, but this has a lot of downsides, where you go forward and turn 90 degrees. But basically, we want to get this curved path. So, the first step to making this work, this is assuming we have positional data from vision or whatever sensors, is figuring out, calculating what path we want to drive. So I'm going to go through a bunch of I'm going to go through the whole process of what we need to do. Yes? Brandon?
Is there like a mathematical way to do this without having like to programming it or like?
There is a mathematical way to do it.
What if I told you that
all?
all
I need to get programmed, but like. Never mind.
Okay.
Wait,
Therefore,
so
Desmos is
just to be
turning
clear, it's the shortest path to a point at an angle in that point.
Shortest path is a good idea. Not necessarily. There's a lot of valid properties of the path that we want to optimize. I'll get to those soon. And before I go too deep, I'm just going to overview what this is going to look like. There's steps to getting this thing to happen. I'm going to go through some of the steps, probably not too in-depth, and then we can go in-depth into the math and programming once we went through the whole pipeline, just so we know what we're after. If at any point you don't understand the math behind it, you don't need to, or at least not right now.
No, it's like there's a reflection thing. I don't know.
It's okay. The point of this lecture may be lost on you, but it's fine.
No. So the point of this lecture is, first of all, that you understand how splines work. I'm going to make some mathematical statements that might only make sense after doing a lot of math. And you can just trust me that the math works out, or you can just do the math yourself later. Because some of the math requires things like multivariate calculus, which I know not everyone has taken. But you don't have to understand exactly how rigorously it's done. You just have to believe me that it can be done, or just assume that and understand how that fits into the pipeline. Okay. So back here. We want to get from point A to point B. The first thing we need to do is find the path we want to go along. So there's a lot of paths. We mentioned things about the shortest path. We have constraints. We have constraints on this path that are absolutely necessary. One, it has to go through this point. It has to start here. It has to end here.
Whoa.
Two, when we end, we have to be facing in that direction. Now, this is not a trivial thing. And we can add way more constraints later. Like we can see, like maybe we want to have. So this is what we call. This is like a. Okay, I'll get to the continuity later. Okay, so possible paths. The first path we tried or thought of is circular arcs, because circular arcs are really nice. With them, like for tank drive especially, often it can be hard computing what each of the sides of the robot should do. So if we find some like point here, that will have actually it would have to be here, because it has to, right here it has to be a 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
Then we can find a circle that lines us up. Yes, Evan?
Is the answer just a Berkey stick mode?
Oh.
A cycloid.
A cycloid is also a cool idea. Is that the one with constantly changing curvature?
It's the one where it's like if you drop a ball
No,
and
yeah,
they're
no.
like if you
Oh,
like,
the Vsauce
it's like
suit,
from
yeah.
point A to point B and it's like down with gravity, then that's the curve you take.
No.
Okay.
Well, first of all, there's many answers. There's a lot of different kinds of splines. There's a lot of different curves that are not splines. But we're going to explore some of them. So, first answer is circular arcs. Notice that currently we didn't place a constraint on where we were headed initially. We are headed in a direction, but for circular arcs, it turns out that if we fix this point and this direction, then there won't be a circle going from any heading out here up to here. Like if we're facing this way, there's not a circle that's going to go from here to here. So the circle is going to mandate which direction we start out facing. If we were down here, it'll be like that. Wait, am I right about this? I'm wrong. About this.
It doesn't mandate. I mean, there are a lot of different circles you can't have, but there's a range to those.
Yeah, you're right. You can have things like if you're here or something, the circle might end up being like this.
I'm so sorry, I didn't realize the thing was going to be this loud.
That's
What
all
is
good.
that?
It's. I think it's
Okay,
Yeah.
so for circles, what we need is we need
So
to
it can be excessive, kind of?
excessive. Yeah.
It goes around the whole way.
I mean, in this case,
Why
that
are
would
we-
be necessary.
Yeah.
This was not only would do it, but yes. Circles are not optimal. However, we might actually want to run them on the robot because they're way simpler. For making a robot follow a circular path, then the relative speeds of the motors don't need to change as you follow the path. Because if you're following a circular arc at this point, that's the same action you'd be doing if you're following it right here. Because the one most important property of circles is that they have constant curvature. What is curvature? You're in multivariable calculus. What is curvature?
It's like, good question. It's probably just like, I mean, it's just, like it sounds like how much it curves. Like I forgot the actual derivative for it, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess how fast the tangent line changes.
Yeah. That is exactly right. Okay. So some of these words might not make sense, but the way we represent paths mathematically is as I'm going to use mathematical words, and you don't have to understand them. But the way we present paths is with vector functions, and what that means is we have a function that starts here. It's a vector function because it's in 2 dimensions. So our first output is right here, and then over time, we generate every point from here to here. So this would be like a function. It takes not a time. We call this s, which is a percentage along the path. And at f of 0, we have to this right here is going to be our f of 0. This is where our function starts. This is where our function ends at f of 1, and everything between this is between 0 and 1. And this is relevant because when we're talking about tangent lines and stuff like this, we want to know the tangent line at 0. Well, we can take derivatives of functions in multiple dimensions. And basically what that means is mathematically compute the tangent line, or the direction in which we are currently facing. So this would be f prime of 0, which is the derivative of the function at 0. So this is a vector function, and what the multivariable calculus class did is they were trying to describe curvature mathematically of a vector function at any point. Because we know we use curvature in language, but a precise mathematical definition of it is if you take an osculating circle, and that's a fancy word, some people call it kissing circles, but if we have our function that looks like that, our path, if we at a point find a circle that is both coincident at this point and tangent right here, and that like matches this curve at this point, then the curvature is defined as
radius of that circle?
Curvature is 1 over the radius. So, if the radius is really, really large, then this line, this right here, it would be really, really flat, and we'd have a really low curvature. If the radius is tiny and we have a really sharp circle, like that, that would be, that's not a very accurate thing, but that's a very curvy section of the path, and that would be a very high curvature. Now, curvature is relevant, because the thing I mentioned about the circle, when robots drive along it, the actions each of the wheels does doesn't change as you go along it. That's precisely because of the curvature of the path. Because as we're driving along the path, we have our robot, which has 2 wheels, and we basically have to raise and lower the velocities of each wheel to stay along the path and to do it as fast as possible. And the direction in which we drive is going to depend on the relative differences between those velocities. We can go along this path fast or slow, but at any point we want to make sure that our, like right here, we want to make sure our right wheel is going some amount faster than our left wheel so that we can follow the arc. And that is determined by curvature. And curvature is really relevant because in circles it's pretty easy, but we can use the same concept of curvature in curves with non-constant curvature to compute how the relative velocities of the wheels should change. Okay. Okay, let's go on to other curves. Yes, Akram.
Wait, just to be clear, with a lot of constraints, you are trying to minimize distance, right? Does minimizing distance automatically minimize the amount of velocity you need, or other things you're trying to optimize?
Okay, yeah, so we should talk about things we want this curve to look like. Okay, so distance is a great one to optimize. It is not the most important one. So the constraints we need to have are the 2 fixed points in this direction. What we want to ideally have are where circles fall flat is that we want to be starting in the current orientation of the robot. We don't want to have to stand in place, then turn to wherever we need to start, and then go, especially if we're on the move. We want to be able to just create a path that will go from wherever we are and there. I'm going to draw less things. But yeah. So that's another property of the path we want. We want to be able to start in a position and heading and end in a position and heading, and we want to be able to do that for any position, any heading. We want to do this quickly. We want splines to be able to, the robot to be able to drive over very quickly. What we most care about is speed, if we assume that it's accurate, and we haven't really looked into what kind of paths would be driven in accurately. What makes us do the path quickest is a complicated question, because if it's shorter, we'll often be faster. But that's not always the case. We find that if you have a really high curvature path, the robot is going to be slower driving along it, because it can max out both wheels if it's going forward, but if it has to turn while going forward,
One of the wheels has to be slow.
one of the wheels has to slow down because the other wheel has to be faster than it, and it has a maximum velocity. Here we get into robot constraints of the motor constraints. The motors, we have constraints on the motors which are maximum velocity for each wheel and a maximum acceleration and maximum deceleration. We can assume those are just opposites of each other, but we don't have to. And also, something else we want to make better, something that makes splines a lot nicer and like faster and stuff like that, is jerk. Anyone know what jerk is?
Isn't that like changing acceleration over time?
Yeah. So we have our, this is going to be relevant later, we have our position, and by the way, all these things are in terms of time. Our spline over here is in terms of S, and time and S are very different. S is a way we parameterize our path, but the way we drive along the path can change. Like we can drive along the same path at different speeds. We can go quickly in the beginning and slowly at the end, or slowly at the beginning and fast at the end, and those would be driving the same path but with different parameterizations of time. So if we have our position in terms of time, velocity in terms of time, acceleration in terms of time, and jerk. Jerk is a derivative of acceleration. So this is basically in the same way that velocity is saying how fast you're changing position, and acceleration is changing how fast you're changing velocity. Jerk is saying how fast you're changing acceleration. Often the robot currently in the code, we have no caps for acceleration or jerk. We just say set the motor to whatever velocity. Doesn't matter if that's instantly jumping from like another velocity. But that is both inaccurate because the motors can't do that. It also damages the motors, but not very much. What? Yes?
I just have a question. Given the function, do you guys have like approximations for the time it would take given the velocity constraints for the robot?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, that's a lot of things to talk about. Okay. So acceleration is ramping up velocity. If we have some unit of acceleration, then that means we can't just set velocity wherever we want. We have to ramp it up and down. Same thing for jerk. There's studies that show that for physical systems, limiting jerk does increase smoothness, even though it's a sort of subjective thing. Because often we'll just say, go for max acceleration or max deceleration, and it doesn't really matter if you're jumping from those like instantly. But jerk will limit that and have you ramp up your acceleration. There is a limit, like there's a lot more of these. You can go as far down as you want with derivatives. But like anything past jerk hasn't been studied because it's extremely difficult to make a physical thing and bind those. Just basically, we don't have to. After acceleration, we know it is super critical to constrain these. Jerk has been shown to be useful, and the rest are wishy-washy, and we don't really need this.
Crackle.
Yeah. Snap, crackle, pop.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Okay. Okay, so we have our circular paths. The way we would find these circular paths is basically we know what the equation for a circle is. We know 2 points on it, and this is by the equation that you can translate the normal equation for a circle to a vector function definition of a circle. And if we know 2 points on it and we know a heading of one of those points, then that will set the circle. We want to be able to have a more versatile function where we can set 2 points and the heading at each. So we need something more complex than a circle because circles can't accommodate that all the time. That's where splines come in. Let me open the presentation that a Nueva alumni made a while ago.
Hanabi Vaticus.
No.
The Spline presentation.
Do we want to lower that thing?
It's so lower to the.
Oh, this is so incredibly annoying.
Where is okay. Bam.
Wait, who made this?
Julia.
Oh, sure.
What the heck
She
is
was in front of me. Yes.
For curvature, when you're trying to optimize curvature, are you using the definition of 1 over r, or are you using definition like dt ds?
Those are equivalent.
I know, but like, which like you can't. I don't know. Like, how would you plug in 1 over like r? I guess.
Oh, we use dtds. Yeah. For circles, we use 1 over r because we know r, but for other random vector functions, we use dtds. Okay. I haven't gone through this presentation in a while, so you might not find it. Okay. Yeah. So, splines are particular vector functions, specifically piecewise polynomial functions. And what that means is, a vector function, you can think of it like a vector of functions. If we have, like, a normal function of time would output a number, would be like, I don't know, 3. But here we have a function of time that outputs a vector. And what that means is, basically, we can decompose this into a function of each component. We can say this is actually just equivalent to x of t and y of t. And we can do this in way more than 2 dimensions. We're just stick in 2 dimensions because we only care about 2 dimensions. Yeah, maybe. So, vector functions are basically, we have a function, we have a pair of functions, one for the x coordinate, one for the y coordinate, and our vector function is the composition of those, where we input a time or an s, and we get out a vector. And that's just parameterized by each of these, or decomposed into these 2 components. So, what a piecewise polynomial function is piecewise a thing you're more used to with regards to functions?
Defining a function in like separate pieces, like f
Oh,
is
do you want to just
0
explain?
to,
I don't know what piecewise means. I haven't used that in a while.
isn't like in ranges, like you define.
Oh, that might be a partial function. I don't know. Oh wait, actually, I might not know what I'm saying about this. Anyone know what a piecewise function
I'm
means?
looking it up.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So function is defined in
Right, it's when it's like defined by different, like other functions from like
Yeah, it
various
is.
So it's like f of
intervals.
x is equal to x when x
Here's
is
a
less
question.
than
Different domains
0.
have different definitions.
Do like functions like round functions, are
Okay.
they piecewise? Because
Um,
technically they aren't quite piecewise, but they're piecewise.
I don't know.
But
Well,
then
maybe
you
this,
define-
maybe
Like
this
the
is the
floor
word.
function.
Maybe this is the wrong word to use, but regardless,
First thing that came up is
the-
math is fun.
the vector function. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna erase this stuff.
It's like fix updates, honestly.
I should probably go faster.
You're doing calculus, right? You're doing calculus.
Also, guys, this is like optional. And
Yeah, you don't have to be here.
like, if anyone's like, oh, why is one from recognition program?
I'm not gonna be offended if you leave.
Could you remove this slice now?
It's like,
Okay. So f of t equals this. An example of a vector function for circles would be the f of t would be some x0 plus r cosine t, and then actually let's start using s here. And then y0 plus r sine t. I know how circles work.
Wait, if it's a circle, does it need the R?
It does need the r. Because circles have radii and
Oh, okay. Oh, obviously.
Obviously.
so this would be x0,
So
y0.
dumb.
Then we have a circle.
Go on,
There
option.
it is. So, this is what a circle vector function would look like. And we could set it such that we could add things to the s to make it such that it goes from like 0 to 1, where this is where s equals 0, and this is where s equals 1 or something. If you wanted to go between this point and this point. And this is the abstract version of, like, this is the form for any circle function, practically. And we can just solve for these constants for whatever position we need. So what a spline is basically the two elements of a spline, the two components, are polynomials. Instead of using sine and cosine or like, I don't know, linear stuff, we're using polynomials. They might be linear. So this might be like s squared plus like 3s, and this might be like s to the 5th minus 4s, yeah, plus 1. That would be what a spline would look like. That is what characterizes spline. The definition of a spline is a vector function where each of the components are polynomial functions on the input. Why are those useful? Well, there's a lot more of them. They can fit a lot of things, and they're very smooth. They're originated from a shipbuilding technique. Cool.
So the acronym. So stupid.
Huh. Okay. How to analyze splines. So there's 3 types of continuity. These are their technical names. The first thing we want is we want them to be continuous in position, which that means they can't jump from one position to another. And this is not really relevant to with the definition I just gave, but for any vector function, these are properties we want. Yes.
So they don't have to be derivable or
Differentiable? No. However, the ones that are not differentiable suck, and we don't want to use them. So the first thing we want is we want them to be continuous in position. If the spline would be like, if an example of a non-differentiable vector function or non-continuous vector function is this. I don't know. Imagine this is a thing. If we go from here to here and then teleport over here, teleporting is bad. We don't want to teleport. We want it to be continuous. Next is C1 continuity, which is continuous in the tangent vector. That means it's differentiable. So basically, we mean that no sharp edges. We can't be going this way and then suddenly going that way, because then our direction is not, if we plotted the direction we were facing, that graph would not be continuous because we teleported from facing this way to facing that way. We need to have some sort of curve that gets us from facing this way to that way. so that we have continuous heading, continuous first derivative. And then C2 continuity is continuous in curvature. This is nice because reasons that will come later. If we define curvature by this like tangent osculating circle, we can have this curvature grow and get smaller, but we can't go from having a really wide circle to suddenly having like that. Even though our heading is continuous here, the curvature is just not continuous. I forgot what the name for that is. Yeah, okay. But those are the types of continuity that are relevant to us. There are more of them. And you can start seeing that here, there's a bunch of points. In our problem, I just posed 2 points that we have to go between. But in general, and what we should add to splines, because currently we can't do that, is have multiple, like more points that we can go through.
Rich, just have smaller, like multiple splines that just connect each point.
Yes.
Like point 1, point 2, point 2, point 3, etc.
That is our plan. Probably.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that's what we're going for. But if it's better to do it with one spline, then yeah, we'll do that. I don't know. That's uncharted territory. Okay. One thing that we could learn from and we are not using is the concept of tension. Often you can, for different kinds of paths and splines, you can define specifically what you want your tension to be, and the tension is around just that point, how close do you want it to be. Like if we know that we want to be facing, that's not exactly what it is. What I was about to say was wrong. But yeah, nice graphs for tension. If that gives you any intuition for what that means.
Lots of intuition.
Okay. Bezier curves are not the kind we use, but they're very cool. And we could use them because a lot of teams do use them. Bezier curves are a way of generating these splines or like curved paths. And let me open the presenter notes so you can all see this. Okay. Yeah.
So we can all see this.
So suppose we have a point 1 and a point 2 that we want to go between. Then we can imagine a line between them where we just take a point that goes from the first one to the second one. Very cool.
Wow.
However,
It's pretty cool.
so we can make these vector functions for saying our position is just going to be like position 2. We're going to start at position 1 when t is 0, and as time increases, we're going to linearly approach p2 using those equations. And then the cool thing about this is that if we have a bunch of points, we can make it way funkier. If we have these 3 points, we can basically generate a mini point, like a stepping stone of a point going between P1 and P2 and P2 and P3. And they both linearly approach their target such that at time 1 they arrive. But what we can do is we can then have a 3rd point on the line between those 2 points that will increase. So basically, if we draw a line between the 2 points, it's going to start 0% of the way there, and then 50% of the way there. This Q0 will be halfway between P1 and P2. Q1 will be halfway between P2 and P3, and then our point will be halfway between Q0 and Q1. And there's really cool animations for this that we should look at.
If you just draw a line that just like goes between like this or something and it draws a curve. Wait, I don't know. Oh,
Like
okay.
that. Ooh.
Oh.
Fancy.
And we have it with more.
Whoa.
That is just a parabola.
That is not a parabola.
That's actually really cool.
It's made. It's a weird
Yes.
So it's just the 2
Parabolas
points.
and all
It's
the
just
normal.
the 2 points that is the parabola, though.
The normal stuff you used to is a subset of splines. Splines can represent parabolas because they parabolas are basically one-dimensional splines, and splines are more dimensions. Sort of. Yes. What?
Never mind.
Okay. These are Bezier curves. That's how you generate them.
You didn't know how to answer that.
That's Italian slang.
It's very related.
Okay, cool.
Are Bezier curves not just the superior option for this task?
No. One thing you might notice about Bezier curves is you give them set points, and what they'll do is they'll use those as guides. They won't go through the set points. This is there's two kinds of like fitting your set points. You either go through them or just sort of be like, oh, cool, those are there.
Can we
I'll
set
make my own
set
path.
points such that the path that it goes through actually goes through the actual set points?
Not with Bezier curves. You can.
Well, it has to
Sort
go
this
through
in
the first and last points, right?
Yes.
Wait,
Um.
can't you daisy chain them?
Yes. But the point is, we need more points in order to make a nice curve. Something that's useful
But
for us.
Daniel, if you combine them together, it's C0.
Okay. Yeah. Not necessarily, but yes, probably. Actually.
Probably, in most cases.
So B-spline is.
What's
We don't
in
need to know about
problem?
these. Basis splines.
Looks hard.
But yeah, they're useful. It's a bunch of Bezier curves put together that are super continuous, C2 continuity, not like the C0. The thing you were saying that might be possible. That's how you do it with B-spline.
That sounds hard.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay. There's a bunch of cool B-splines. P-spline is really cool because you can add a penalty function, where if we want to induce certain types of paths, we can penalize like high curvature. Or something that we'll see is bad is high derivative curvature. Okay. NURBs are cool. They allow you to do not weighting, things like that. You can see what it looks like. I should go through this fast. It's 420. So,
It's actually
420 though.
Hermite splines.
Thanks for that, Evan.
These are the splines we use. Ta-da! In this slide, we talked about cubic ones. We use cubic and quintic, but we can use more. These are basically the kind of constraints we set. Instead of giving it a bunch of points, we give it a starting and end point, and we want to have constraints on those, like their tangent vectors. The first derivative, like we want to set the values at 0 and 1. We want to set the derivatives at 0 and 1. And if we go to quintics, we can even set the second derivative at 0 and 1. And the calculation is hard, but we do the calculation anyways. They look like this. Wow, that's what we want to have. Go through the points. It's super cool because they're super continuous and smooth. I don't remember these.
It's because I'm not.
These have to do with, these are special types of quintics. Quintics are way cooler than cubics, because they allow you to do things way more smoothly. They allow you to, basically, you can ramp things up in further, in like deeper derivatives such that it only manifests later. Cubics have a constant third derivative, and quintics have a constant fifth derivative, so even the third derivative is smooth. And basically, they give you super smooth
What
things.
about a sixth derivative?
We usually want them to just be odd.
Yeah, that's true.
How about we go to, wait for it, 9?
Wait, so are the splines with polynomials C2 continuous?
Yes,
Exactly.
Did I just miss that? Or did you not caught that yet?
I've not said that. I think they are. Yes,
I think they are.
I'm sure they are. I'm mostly sure they are. Okay, discrete. These don't care. Don't care what these. Blah blah.
Attention.
We want to have smooth splines. Something we haven't gotten too deep into is how to get good paths with the stuff we want. Like optimize for distance and stuff like that. We're not really sure how to do that yet. This is a comparison of all the properties of
Wait,
splines.
one's at who's we?
Oh, I worked on this with Mickey, who is no longer with us. And
What
Avery,
happened to
Avery helped some, and he's no longer with us.
Oh, sure, it's like Hunger Games.
Okay, cool.
Don't be like these kids. Actually,
What did Nikki do? He left, right?
You're the
He
power.
just started to realize.
and Daniel in the middle was like, you
Be a
put it
member
in
of
the
the
video, and I was like,
Cubic,
what?
Hermite,
any. Just
Okay,
like
so
we use
something
Cupid
different with some
That's
fancy
pretty
names.
good.
There's cool demos online that you toy around with this. Basically, if you define the endpoint and they give you other points to define this end.
Bezier curve.
Oh my god.
How do you know, yo?
I
it
thought
Bezier?
we wanted.
It's bourgeois.
Okay, yeah, maybe you're right.
Oh my god.
Any any.
Bird walks.
Okay, basically, we can solve the equation for the circle by knowing what circles look like, and then mathematically figuring out which circle fits our constraints. Thing is, circles do not fit enough constraints because we have too many constraints, and circles don't exist that fit our constraints. So we go with these more complicated stuff, splines, and splines have all of these, like, especially quintic splines have so many options. If we look back at the definition of a quintic spline. Basically, we have a lot of possible constants. Here, I probably corresponds to dimension. So this can be done in any number of dimensions. But in any dimension, it's a quintic polynomial, and that means that in 2 dimensions we'll have these 5, 6 constants that we can that can determine the spline. So if in 2 dimensions, that's 12 constants. 12 numbers we can vary. 12 degrees of freedom for choosing a spline. Whereas with circles, we had a lot less, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know. And we need more degrees of freedom. So quintics are really good, cubics are really good. Sometimes quintics might even have too many degrees of freedom, and sometimes we have to choose what we want to do with the other ones. Because when we don't fully constrain all these degrees of freedom, we have extra constants that we need to figure out what we want to actually set them to, because there's multiple possible values that satisfy the path we want. And they'll give us different paths. So that's an interesting question of how we could decide that. So, do we care about the math of actually finding the quintic spline that fits our points, or can we just assume that we can figure it out?
I guess we just.
Don't assume it.
Don't assume
What
it.
happens when you assume?
We just skip a whole portion of Osh's lecture and guess that, and we can.
I didn't plan to derive it because it's not pretty complicated.
It's not pretty
It
complicated.
is pretty complicated.
It's not.
Wait,
It's
like,
not
how
pretty complicated.
Not super.
It's like that long complicated? That's pretty long.
Oh no.
Don't worry about this.
Oh my god.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry.
Don't
Okay,
worry about it.
pass it.
There's a lot of triangles and also other characters.
Oh, this
Oh no, the big triangle of math death.
Okay, there's a lot of ways people do the same, achieve the same result for quintic splines for deriving it. I don't know. You can solve this big systems of equations where
That's
you're
just
like
Pascal's.
Master's thesis.
it just has to do with Pascal's triangle.
It's pretty cool.
But yeah, basically you can solve. You don't have to worry about how you solve it. But for example, in our code, we just use the math. Oh, look at all those polling news feeds. For example, we have a quintic spline generator, which finds the quintic spline given your constraints.
Oh no, that function's so long.
Yes. So the thing is about quintic splines is to generate a quintic spline, we need a lot of constraints. More constraints than we actually have. So, don't worry. Okay.
This is why Dark exists.
Regardless. So, for example, our constraints, we need an initial position and a final position, an initial heading, a final heading, and for quintic splines we also have an initial acceleration and final acceleration.
Actually, it's sort of polling.
So basically, to generate a quintic spline, which is what we do with this class quintic spline generator, we take an initial position x, initial position y, final position x, y, blah blah, init vel, final acceleration, basically a lot of these. And then with those,
Thank you.
we use this is the solution to the systems of equations. You don't have to worry about it
Oh
too
no.
much. But basically, it turns out that the coefficients for the polynomial you saw, we have to solve for those that fit our whatever constraints we have. And the solution looks like this. It's not a huge deal. This is the first constant, the one that is associated with x to the power of 0. This is the one associated with x to the power of 1.
How were these numbers chosen? Did you just solve them by hand and then plug it in?
We solved them with Mathematica, and saw how people solve them in papers. But yes, we just plugged them in. And you don't have to worry about that again because once we figure out how these are solved, the things to solve them, we just using this, they're already solved. So basically, if you doubt me that you can find the perfect spline, you can generate a perfect spline given constraints of initial position, initial and final position, heading, acceleration. You can. How you do it? We can get into how we derive that, but that's not super relevant. Yeah. Thanks.
Hey, that worked better than I thought.
That was cool things. For cubics, it's a bit shorter. Yeah. Yeah. So we can find these paths. Okay, cool. So suppose the robot sees its position. It knows I'm here. I need to be there. I'm heading this way. I need to be ending up heading this way. I generate a spline to get a path from here to there with those constraints. We have a path. We have this vector function. Now, how do we actually drive along it? Now, this is the hard part.
That was relatively simple.
No. No. I don't know. It's okay. Let's see what this paper does. Velocity profiles. This is an important word. Okay. So the distinction I made between S and T before now is super relevant because the path is parameterized by S because the path doesn't care how the robot drives along it. The path is a set of points. The robot is going to drive along it, and we're going to have to figure out how it can drive along it because if the robot starts at 0 velocity, it's going to have to ramp up its velocity, and it's going to have to do that for each wheel. So when we have a path here, add an eraser. For a path, this is the path that our robot will take, that we want our robot to drive it. The robot is actually composed of a tank driver with a right wheel side and a left wheel, and those are going to look like this. We're going to have these paths that are right next to our actual path that go right here. Boom. This is just becoming more and more messy, so I'll just keep erasing things. That means erase more. Okay. So we have our path. Looks like that. That's a spline we generated. We don't have a visualizer for this in Java, even though we programmed it in Java. But we do in mathematical, so we'll start opening that because mathematical takes a while to open. But our splines are going to have. We also have it in Desmos.
You should open it in Desmos.
So once we generate a path for the robot, we're going to generate a path for each wheel. Because the wheels are going to follow these paths, and we pretend that it's just like one wheel. And now it's a matter of making the wheels follow the paths. And to do that, we know how to make a wheel like get to a velocity or like go a distance. We have PID. With PID, we just say, hey, we treat two wheels as one wheel. But we just say, hey wheel, hey motor, go like 10 inches forward. And we can do that. The way we basically do that is you know what PA is. Okay. The problem here is that we can't just tell the wheels to go forward. We need the wheels to be synchronized such that they go forward along this path because the way we define turning, the way turning happens is by the relative velocities of each wheel. Now, I went back to my Google Photos and found a bunch of whiteboard photos that might be relevant. Not relevant.
There's
Okay.
a lot of whiteboard photos.
Oh. Okay.
Why we killed it?
Yes. Okay, these are not. I don't know. Okay, so the thing is, the way we started doing this was wrong. When we first tried to solve to figure out how do we make the wheels follow the path. But that is not actually related to what I'm talking about, I don't think. Okay. No? No. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Oh no.
Okay, this is the same thing that our spline code did.
Oh dear God.
Don't worry about it. Basically, you can see we have things like x0, y0, vx0, vy0. 0 is the initial, 1 is the final. And we have all these constants for position, velocity, and acceleration in the beginning and the end in both dimensions. And that should look familiar to the field because we can multi-row calculus. This is
Which one is
computing.
TA?
What?
Are you TA?
Not this semester. I don't have a free block tomorrow.
You really should be.
Eric is here too. So yeah, you might recognize basically that's finding the vector functions like v, t, and k given our spline function, and our spline function is this polynomial that's quintic.
Triple prime is the jerk, right?
Triple prime is the jerk. We sort of ditched jerk because it was pretty difficult, and we can get to that later. We don't have anything for jerk finding yet because it's really hard. So, what's relevant here is not much.
No.
But basically, given the constraints of x, y, v, whatever, we have our polynomial coefficients. We can just use Mathematica to say like solve for them. So we do. And we solve for them, and these are the coefficients we end up with, and then we graph it, and look at that. It's like what I drew. It's a thing we can actually compute. How is this relevant? This is relevant because we need that computation of curvature along the path in order to know how to synchronize the wheels. I don't know the math for this. I could try driving it again. That might fail. But basically, at every point, the path looks instantaneously like a circle. And by that I mean it has a curvature. And the circle is just constant curvature. So if we're on a path, and we have this point, and we know what the curvature is, and the curvature is 1 over the radius. If we know our turning radius,
What was that? What just happened?
that was really good.
By the way, I meant to do that.
What just happened? You don't
Does anyone here not know who Max is?
Billy, don't do it.
Yeah.
Good math.
Do you want it?
Billy, don't do it.
Okay. This is where I run out of steam because I hadn't planned details and being this far up. And I assumed I would know the math and I don't.
Did you assume everyone would just leave by the time you got this far?
Oh, you're like, no.
I realized that I should not
Actually, I have a
take
question.
too long. Yes.
Why isn't the splines done? Like, what is left to do about splines?
Oh, the thing I said about the beginning where I go over the overview of how it works and then go in detail is wrong. I didn't do that. I was going to do that and then tell you.
On the screen.
What's wrong, Osher?
So for one, this library doesn't work. For two, we don't have error correction.
And why aren't we using something simpler like Bezier?
They're not simpler and they don't really fit over.
No, my question is, why is they spend so much time for
It's really cool.
This is not just a slight speed up.
No, if the drivers
Akshar.
If you think I care about the drivers or the robot, you are partially correct. I would care about this a lot more.
At the beginning, or just.
Osher. Why don't we just use a pre-built FRC library for splines?
Okay. Now let's talk about robotics. In the history of technology class that I took, we learned about the stone axe built 2 million years ago.
Whoa.
And the stone axe it was supposed to have like a circular-ish edge, and to make it more circular, the person who cut 4 separate edges that they sharpened. And the historians say, you don't need 4 edges, that has no functional purpose. You know why they did it?
What?
It's cool. It looks cooler, it feels fine.
That's not what this is. There's no functional purpose, it's only just that it's cool.
This is innovation. I mean, yes, but it would be an easier. Yes. Well, these are really easy. Did you see how we computed the spines? We just put in the solve coefficient, like the constant. Solving the spines, like the mapping derivatives isn't super simple, but actually doing this. Okay. Back on track. Suppose we were.
Right. Can just have like two eyes. So it's kind of know what that is.
How does this work?
No, hold on.
That was
17.
Okay. Oh, here I'm trying to figure out how to drive along circles. So suppose we have a circle that we're driving along. It looks like this. This is the path of the robot. In reality, we have two wheels. We have wheel number 1. We have wheel number 2. How do we move these such that the robot follows this path? Suppose the wheels were spaced such that this wheel is halfway across the radius. That's kind of halfway, whatever. Halfway across the radius, halfway, and then equally far away on this side. If we drove this wheel at half speed that we drove this wheel, then this wheel would cover twice as much circumference as this wheel, which is basically if we drive this at double the speed of this, and that's not what I meant to do. I meant to say that basically if this distance and this distance, that's a really terrible drawing.
The radius of the second circle.
Yeah, basically for each of the wheels, they'll have their own circles. And the ratio between the radii of these circles is the same as the ratio between the circumferences of those circles.
Yeah.
Yes?
Circumference is just 2 pi r, so
Yeah. So if we know the ratio between the radius of these circles, and the way we'd find that is we would know by using the curvature of the path, we can find the radius of the circle that is oscillating to the path, and we can just change that radius by the width of the robot to get to either side. And then using knowing the radiuses of these two circles, the ratio between them is going to need to be the ratio between the speeds of the wheels. Because if we want to cover the same amount of circumference, like some appropriate amount of circumference of this wheel as we do in this wheel in some amount of time, they need to be going at relative speeds that are equal to the ratios of the circumferences. So that's something we can do. We can say, if we're driving along a circle, we know how to drive along a circle because we just know this wheel has to be going like, I don't know, left has to be going twice as fast as right. Where left is and right, L and R are the motor speeds of left and right wheels. Thing is, we have velocity constraints. We have maximum velocity. So, if we had some maximum velocity and we wanted to be going across as fast as possible, what we would do is we would say, right wheel, this is not how it works. That's that.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, we can't have, no, it's the other way. Okay, I'm on to it now.
Oh, I guess I was just
the right wheel has to be going twice as fast as the left wheel in this scenario. That means the left wheel cannot be going at maximum velocity, because if the left wheel is going at max velocity, the right wheel would be going twice max velocity. So we have to we have to set the outer wheel to max velocity, because the inner wheel is going to be going slower. And if the inner wheel is at max velocity or anything higher than what it is if the right wheel is going at max velocity, then the outer wheel would be going too fast. So our biggest constraint is the outer wheel. The outer wheel has to be going as fast as possible, and the inner wheel has to wait for it by going a bit slower.
Is the inner wheel left or right?
In this case, it is left.
So if the inner wheel is left, then why is it 2L equals R?
I was going to, that's why I changed it and then I changed it back, because these represent motor speeds. The right wheel has to be going twice. Yes.
Oh god.
That is so sad.
That is pretty sad. Okay. So these are sort of desired velocities for our motors along a circular path. Now this is important because not only can we do this for circles, we can do this for any path if we know the instantaneous curvature of that path. We know what we want the wheels optimally to be going at, what we want the velocities to be.
Wait, how do you express the curvature as the relationship of the wheel's velocity?
We get the ratio of the wheel's velocities from the curvature.
Yeah, but how do you do that?
So basically, hold on. So we get a curvature from our vector map. This curvature is 1 over r. Now, that's the radius of this big circle, of the middle circle.
Yeah.
The left circle is going to be left r, rl, is going to be r plus width over 2. or let's say minus, and then radius right is going to be, okay, I shouldn't use R for all these.
Maybe make width like radius width, so it's simpler.
It's not always. So, from curvature we find our radius. From the radius we find the radii of each of the wheels. And then the ratio of the radii of the wheels will have to be the same as the ratio of the velocities of the wheels.
How do you calculate the radius? But is the ratio of the speeds the same as the ratio of the radii?
Yes, because the ratio of the speeds has to be equal to the ratio of the circumferences. Because the
Which
speeds.
is the same as the ratio of the
Exactly. So this is how we can find our desired velocity. If we were going optimally, we would want, well, this is necessary. And our desired velocity is this, such that the outer wheel is we maximize the outer wheel's velocity. We set it to max velocity. And we can use this to say, okay, if we go along our path, suppose we have a graph of S and R, and we have another graph of S and L, where S is how far along the path we are. We know what the ratio of these, if this is a circle, the ratio would be constant. And suppose we were just going along a circle this whole way. We want R to be at max V. We want R to be going to max velocity the whole way, and L to be at some fraction of max V, given by this, the whole way.
I thought they were going, oh, of course. Never mind.
This is if it's a circular path. But we can use the same thing, and, okay, yeah, let's just talk about circles first. So, this is what the motion profiles look like for circles. This is our desired velocity, and also our maximum velocity possible. For the right wheel and the left wheel, along the whole path, where S goes from 0 to 1. So, how do we make the motors actually move like that? Because we said we had things like acceleration constraints. This is what, so basically we went from a path to desired velocities for the wheels along the path. So, how do we make the wheels actually do that because we have acceleration constraints? Well, we can't just set the wheel to this velocity, but we can ramp up the velocity like so. And then when it reaches out, we're there.
Oh, no, so funny.
And this is a graph of velocity. So if we just bind acceleration, then we can have this slope would be our maximum acceleration.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
So does that mean you have to preserve the ratio of right to left while accelerating?
Now there is a great point. This is so exactly. That's what stumped us for a while. Because we generated these and we're like, okay, cool. We'll just try to. We know what we want. The idea we want them to be going at. So we'll just get them to go at that as fast as possible, and we'll be good. The problem is you have to make sure that while not only are the ideal ratios correct to follow the path, you want to make sure that when you're ramping up to get to what you need to be, you're also following the path. Otherwise, you're going to be off path. And there's another complication. Acceleration is the derivative of velocity with respect to time.
With respect to S.
This graph is velocity over s. This is not a straight line in velocity over s. We need to somehow get from s to time so we can make this a straight line.
But they can't just say like how long it takes to complete the whole thing.
No, because it constantly changes.
That's true, yeah.
So we could do this sort of.
X and time would be equal. What did he do?
Took the ball out of the trash. We could do this sort of iteratively. We could say we're right here. We want to ramp up velocity as fast as possible because we're not there yet. So we could just say, I don't know. This doesn't look exactly like a line. Maybe I have relevant photos of this. Another problem is, so first of all, we have to somehow make this jump between s and time, and it's weird because as we're traversing s, we're changing how that jump happens because s sort of, what we can do, actually, yeah, I'm talking about
Oh
this.
wait, that is really weird because
It is really weird.
as you change it, it changes the relate.
Yeah.
Wait, so then how does that work?
It's weird. It's weird.
Great answer, Osher.
I give this.
Oh yeah. This is a cool thing. Okay. S is actually often used to refer to arc length. Something we can convert S, or whatever I called S, into is arc length. That's something we can do without much difficulty by using computing stuff on our spline. S was sort of our percentage along the spline that we use to parameterize our polynomial functions. But we can calculate without knowing anything about the robot. Basically, at
The length, like the total length of the path.
yeah.
And then just convert S to length of the path.
Yeah. So we can calculate the arc length, how far along the path we've gone at a particular S. Now this arc length is useful because it's an actual has a real property. It's just the distance covered. So we can call this like arc length. We can get from S to arc length.
I don't think Casey's here today.
In this paper they call it arc length S.
Well, good for you.
And this is a nice visualization because it shows that these don't necessarily match. There's some wonky stuff getting from one to the other, but we can get from one to the other. We can get from the internal spline parameter to the arc length. And that's something I can show you how it's done in the code, I guess. Once we get in terms of arc length, now we have velocity over distance. And doing that graph from velocity over distance, it has that problem that we were talking about, where normally you know how velocity changes over time, but you don't know how it changes over distance, because you can get from distance to time knowing your velocity, but as you change your velocity, the change from distance to time is also going to change. So it's fun. It's very fun.
Then how do you actually find one?
How do you do that? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't remember.
Documentation.
This is, I do have documentation. It's just
And kill the Batman just there. Obviously.
oh. Okay. Basically, there's ways to fix that.
I love how you
sure.
have zip of photos.
Oh, so you remember the 971 workshops?
Yes, I did go to those.
Is it? Yeah, I was there. Remember?
Yes, I remember you being there.
But was it? Didn't they use voltage instead of encode? Am I delirious? They used voltage. This is completely unrelated to this.
Yes.
Most of the end of the day. But they used voltage. What did they use voltage for? Like they were using specifically instead of using encoders and shit. Weren't they just like directly setting the voltage for the stuff they wanted to be? Because you were there in the follow-up session when they actually implemented it, right?
Simulation.
Was it simulation?
No.
I don't know. They simulated how voltage transferred into motor output by knowing the hardware of the motor, which was something they did.
Is that like worth implementing?
I guess. Yes, it is for our control loop simulation.
Okay, sorry, that was just completely random.
But anyways.
If it doesn't work, just
Okay,
skip it.
the way 254 did this in 2014 is they used this thing called pulse, which they said impulse, which basically said basically crank the acceleration, and they said they cranked the acceleration until they could no longer crank the acceleration, and they stopped. And it's a reasonable way to do it, but you have to do more math for this because.
Wait, you have to crank up the acceleration.
No,
To be clear, when you say 254, you mean their mentor, right?
Yes. that code was not written by students.
Wait, so now I'm confused, because ramping up velocity required
yeah, yeah.
computation. So does ramping up
no.
acceleration
There
require
is, but
computation?
neither 254 nor us have done that yet. I just meant like put acceleration in max. And they said at this time step we're going full acceleration, and then they see how velocity changes.
Just complex.
So the thing is, this gets way more complicated than this, because the problem with this is that this is how it looks for circles. Circles are bad, as we covered. For splines, however, we can do the same operation. It's just not constant. If we know that using vector math, given the vector function of a spline, we can just use the definitions of curvature in vector math to derive its curvature at any point. We can figure out the curvature at any point, and at any point along the path, we can figure out the radiuses of the two circles, and we can figure out the ratios, and we can figure out which one has to be at max velocity. But the thing is, it's gonna look different. It's gonna look like maybe if we're following a path that looks like this. We start out straight, and then we start turning, and then we turn the other way.
I'll love that sound, Osher.
All for you. So the way it's going to start out is L and R are both supposed to be at max velocity because we're going straight, and we can just max both of the velocities. But then as we start turning, as the curvature increases and increases,
Turn left.
L
Left.
left. Yeah, we're turning left. So L has to get smaller. Let me erase this. L has to get smaller and smaller as we keep turning. And then eventually we'll reach our max curvature, and then we start decurving back to forward. So we're going to go back maybe like that, and then once we reach forward again, we're now turning the other way, and L is going to be maxed, and R is going to go down. And then here we go back up, and like that. So for this curve, this is my approximation of what the velocity profiles, the ideal velocity profiles would look like. We always want the outer wheel to be going at max velocity. When we're going forward, both wheels are going at max velocity. And the more curved the path is, the slower the inner wheel has to go, because it has to wait more for the outer wheel, because it's going way further than the inner wheel. And as we switch the directions we're curving, it's going to change which wheel is maxed. And as we curve more or less, this stuff is going to change. So now it's more complicated. Before, it was just a matter of ramping up to our max velocity. And also I didn't draw it, but at the end we want to stop normally, so it's ramping down at the end. Now it's more complicated because we want to ramp up to our max velocity, but suddenly our max velocity changed. And this is a problem, because especially if our max deceleration is a shallower slope than this, if this is our max acceleration, once we hit this point, we can't just decelerate, because our max deceleration looks like this. So we'll be over the bar here, and we'll be missing it. So we need to basically plan for these and figure out what's the furthest we can go before we have to start slowing down, because right here we have to be able to slow down this much.
What happens if it's impossible?
It's always possible because you can always just go slower. So basically, this is a sort of thing where we have to look at this at whatever the maximum velocity, the desired velocity is, and try to ramp up to it, but also plan ahead to ramp down.
Did you guys do all of this and get a function for time?
Yes.
Oh, instead of taking it.
So the thing we did with Spline specifically is what we did to do this. This is practically impossible for any spline, because this graph is going to be like wonky and curvy, and we don't want that because that's optimizing for that is hard. So what we did is we split splines into segments where the curvature is roughly similar and the derivative curvature isn't too bad. Where basically we said it looks something like this. Except we had conservative estimates for curvature. So basically we said we made segments of the spine. Going along the spine, we looked at how the curvature changed, and if it passed a certain threshold, we would just end that segment and make a new segment, so that each segment had roughly constant curvature. Basically this is way easier to optimize over. But basically we know how to run curvature on a specific segment. How do you go on that? Okay. So we have these segments that we go between with different desired velocities or maximum velocities. Yes.
So is there a way, like for a program, like you just enter in all of the constraints and then it outputs a spline and it also does this?
Yes.
Or do you have to do it?
No, it does this for you. Because the whole point is that the robot does this.
So how good does it look at the end? Does it work? Like how accurate is it with these approaches?
I don't know. We never tested. Let's look at the code. Okay. I realize I'm losing people and that I'm losing myself as well. I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with this.
Wait, are people still engaged in like this thing?
Probably not.
Like, just show of hands, how many people are like actively watching? I mean, Akshar is, but
I'm like
It's a little bit hard to process for me.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Because I'm parsing through data.
This is very hard to process. I haven't processed it yet.
For my case.
Okay.
No.
I just want to get that as a poll, just so
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, I'm gonna step aside from the technical stuff for a second. Basically, I got too deep into this.
Now you can't get yourself out?
No. The problem is that we are trying to drive this math, and I still don't understand it. And I'm not sure exactly what is the right way to do it or how it works. So explaining it is hard. Especially because I don't want to go too deep into the math, and I did, I think. So the first step of the process that we went over is finding a path. We have our constraints. We have where we are. We have where we want to be. We find a path that goes between them. For that, we use splines. then we want to be able to follow that path. And for that, we want to find our desired velocities for the wheels. We do that by using the curvature of the spline to approximate it, to say like if it's like any curve looks like a circle instantaneously. So at any point, if we know how to drive along a circle, which we derive the math for, we can drive along we know how we should be able to drive along a spline at any point.
So we cut everything down into really small instantaneous pieces and then drive along those really, really instantaneous pieces as if they were circles.
Exactly.
And hopefully approximate a spline.
Yes. The problem with that that we were starting to get into is that you have to do forward planning and backwards planning. Because once we have the path, we start with our positions and our constraints. We get a path. We get our desired velocities. The problem now is the actual physical constraints in the motors. This is called motion profiling, of ramping up to them and keeping the wheels synchronized. So if we just generate the velocity profile for each wheel individually, there's a problem that Akshay pointed out, where if they don't ramp up at the same rate or whatever, or don't do that synchronously, we will stop following the path, because while our desired velocities follow the path, to get to those velocities we have to do acceleration constraints, and then it might not stay along the path. Also, to figure out how you should ramp up and down, acceleration up and down, you have to do some fancy stuff for approximations and looking ahead and looking back for what is the actual velocity that you can reach, because you can't always just speed up because you are not able to speed down fast enough. So now we have these.
Slow down?
Yeah.
Speed down.
Speed it negatively.
So that's the overview. Did people, does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah.
Oh, wait, yeah.
But like the math behind it, I don't think I'm gonna understand like in the next 2 years.
Okay, wait, did it not make sense to anybody what I just said?
Yep.
What didn't make sense? All of it?
I didn't listen, so.
There's like the last, there's like the last part where.
God, I could barely
adjusting the
understand.
motor-
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened?
Like, how
I
would
wasn't
you-
really paying attention.
How would you like even approach adjusting motor constraints? Because like you can't assume instantaneous acceleration and stuff like that. How would you like not like a math behind it, but how would you even approach that problem?
Well, we can make approximations, and we can look into the physics of motors, and then we can add jerk binding. We can think about the physics of motors to see what we can actually do. But regardless, we can make reasonable approximations.
Wait, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So why is it hard to calculate things like jerk? If you can just take the difference of acceleration over time as an approximation.
That's good.
I don't calculate jerk.
I have to.
The problem is bounding
I'm looking
jerk.
at too much.
Basically, if you bound jerk, instead of these lines looking like this, they start looking like this. And then getting those with the correct bound jerk, the math for it is not easy to solve.
Why would you use splines? Like splines aren't.
I think I
or
just
I
based
would
this
think
from
they
you
are.
gave me,
They're
I can't really do
also
anything.
solved
But if
for
you're going to explain to me
minimum
exactly
time.
what you said.
Like you don't know when they are, right?
I have to figure out.
Yeah, so if they aren't the optimal thing, why wouldn't you just make them not optimal or something?
Website.
Why wouldn't you just make it from find the smallest distance, calculate the time for the smallest distance of
If you would like to take the time to do that and make it look nice, you're welcome to.
Yeah, but couldn't you just,
Mar-
if you found the
it's
optimal
also less
circle
customized.
line between the two, would that automatically be effects?
Well, I was actually looking to do something that is like circle, but has a constant change in curvature, or composites has like a form of lines, circles, and lines which have zero curvature, circles that have constant curvature, and these things which have constant derivative curvature, those could be useful. But splines are not particularly difficult. Like the path we choose, the math for it comes out to be pretty easy. We calculated all the math behind splines. The problem is making the motors follow that path, which is also hard to do.
And those are for circulars. I would imagine it would be easier for circulars.
Just don't display.
It would be easier, but so,
This is cooler.
yeah. Okay,
And better.
that's the most important thing. It's cool.
And does the math always do better than a circle would?
Yes, splines can represent circles.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
That's useless.
Show them the thing.
Whoever just killed the charge is an evil human being.
It's not very
Okay, so, okay, people who want to pay attention, I'm gonna drag these more, try to make this more clear. People who don't want to pay attention, it would be cool if you were quiet or went somewhere else. No, nothing personal, just.
Wait, how many people do want to pay attention? Raise your hand. Oh, shocking.
Very cool.
Basically, everyone raises their hands.
So, did people understand the overview or should I go over it again?
And it looks bad.
Evan?
You ever use Spline?
Yes, of everything we just went through.
It just looks
Right,
bad.
so basically, if you want to get from point A to point B, the entire left hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to get from point A to point B, so one way you could do it is you could just go a straight line. But if you want to have a certain direction to go to point you arrive at point B, then one way you could do it would be a circle, where it's like the vertical route to point B. But then that's not exactly efficient. So then the way that we do it is splines. And splines are figured out using these cool functions like cubics. And then there's the B splines and the splines before that, I forget the name of. Start with a Z.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Right.
I'm sure I'll lose.
And then there were several other different types of splines. Comedians or something. Yeah.
There's a better way
But then
to show.
up there you put like some cool macro splines.
Like it's
in
circles.
circles. Right, and basically the point of splines is that it's always like based on this curvature like the circle. So it's like as though we're always driving on a circle. Even though we're not actually.
Well, I can see what they
Driving
want,
on
but
like
the
a
way.
circle.
Yeah.
specifically said.
Yes.
Can you repeat the forward backward problem again?
The forward back problem is a great issue. That's the thing I was looking at that was really confused because I think we did it wrong in the code.
What's the forward backward problem?
The thing is, because we have acceleration constraints,
Oh, yeah.
normally when we're trying to get our maximum velocity, we can just say, go up to our maximum velocity.
But it takes time to get there, and that makes us go off the path because of the velocity requested by the graph if the slope of the change in velocity requested by the graph is steeper than the acceleration, then it doesn't match.
Yes, that's a different problem.
Oh.
That is another problem.
No.
There are many problems.
So,
Also, everything's instantaneous.
Why is your chart there
So
over
while
here?
you're changing the acceleration to match, while you're changing the velocity to match the path, that's going to have to change meanwhile because the path is changing on an infinitesimal level.
yes.
Everything
Okay.
changes.
Regardless.
We can just
Can you just make it a lots of lines?
value.
Make the spline into lots of lines.
But that doesn't work
Why not?
because
Oh, obviously it doesn't because it doesn't turn into lines.
Convert your
Could you just round the edges? Make lines and round the edges. Does that work?
okay.
Does that work?
I mean, that is what I don't know what that means, but yeah.
You make a line and then you round the edge. Then you make a line
Okay.
and round the edge.
People. So, it seems like people sort of understand what splines are in terms of the path and what problems they fix, and like that there is a way to compute them using like polynomials or whatever. The thing I'm getting into now is driving along the splines, which no longer has to do with a path. It just takes in any path, and then we convert it to this problem of profiling the velocities of the motors. Okay. So I'm gonna go over this for a second again because it seems like not everyone understands this. So, to get the motors to follow the splines, we use math with the curvature to figure out what the ratio between the motors has to be. And then we use our maximum velocity to figure out what our ideal velocities should be if we're going at our max velocity and sticking true to those ratios. Now, the problem is we have to ramp up to them. And sometimes if we have to be at a lower velocity in the future, like if there's a really sharp curve and we are at max velocity, we won't be able to decelerate in time to follow that curve. And that's a problem because then we can't follow it. So we have to do things, the one problem we have is we have to look ahead to see when do we need to start decelerating, because we can't just stick at maximum velocity. We have to decelerate early in order to reach whatever constraints we have if we have a really sharp curve. And we have to do the same things for going forward. The way we do that is we segment the spline into a bunch of sections with constant curvature, or in roughly constant curvature, and then you do forward passes and backwards passes on them to match those. Don't need to get into that too deep.
Wait.
Yes.
Weren't you mentioning one of the ways of finding curves that you use a cost function? Could you implement something like that, but for sharper curves?
using cost function is a cool idea. I don't think I mentioned it. If I did, I was wrong. If we could somehow weigh costs, assign a cost to curvature, then we could remove most of curvature. That'd be cool. But I don't know what that is.
Wait, I thought you did mention like a way that you could penalize certain.
Oh yeah, that was on the presentation. We didn't use that one.
But maybe we could integrate that into.
That would be really useful. Okay.
Because then you could like penalize sharp curves. We could figure out like what the sharpest curve that can be made is, and then.
You're exactly right. We sort of did a sketchy way of doing this where with quintic splines we add those extra parameters that are unset. And we set those to things that we know would sort of make it less curvy. Whatever. Okay, but yes, that is a good thing that we need to do. So, and the other problem, other than the fact that we have to look ahead to see when to decelerate and stuff like that, is that the wheels have to stay consistently on the same at the same ratio while we're accelerating, and not at the ideal velocities. And for that, we basically scrapped this almost, and we reframed the problem as instead of a right wheel and a left wheel, we have a forward velocity and a rotational velocity. And it makes the math a bit more difficult. But instead of ramping like L and R, we ramp W and which we call rotational velocity and V. Omega, yeah.
W.
And basically, this makes it possible to profile, but it makes the math a lot more difficult. So I'm not going to get into it. But I might have a cool photo of it. Nope. The zip files are basically iPhones take these like motion pictures, and it's zipped with the video and the photo.
Motion pictures? You mean movies?
No, the live photos.
Or videos, maybe?
They're really annoying when you try to export them.
Wait, why do you take your pictures as live photos?
It's set like up by default.
Yeah, but
Well, change it.
you can just not do that.
You could not do that, but you could also
Maybe
not
you
not
could
do that.
also-
Right, you could also not.
Wait, so
not
how are
do
they
that.
I'm so smart.
All like 1,000
Reading is-
pictures.
Well, as
Okay,
you can
whatever.
see that not all of these pictures are zipped, so therefore they don't
Okay,
have
I'm
to
too lazy to go through my
all of
photos.
these pictures.
Anyways, so by rephrasing it as a rotational velocity and linear velocity, we can make sure that we match left and right wheels, because we can use the linear velocity to basically achieve the maximum velocity. We can ramp that up, and we make the constraint stronger such that we can affect the rotational velocity at the same time. And the rotational velocity is all we need in order to make sure the wheels are going at the same speed. And it's basically the rotational velocity acts as a thing to stabilize the wheels so that they're going at the same speed or at the appropriate speeds. And it's an additional constraint on the linear velocity, and that's the thing that we just ramp up. You don't have to worry about that too much. But basically, that's how we get around that problem.
I don't like.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not going too much depth because I haven't thought about it in like 2 years.
I just want to hear it again.
When we try to profile the wheels, we get the ideal velocities for the wheels, and we profile those, they'll get desynced. It's practically impossible to sync them. I mean, it might be possible if we stopped going down that path. If we rephrase this as a forward velocity and a rotational velocity, where like V is equal to L plus R over 2, the average velocity, and W, omega, is equal to L minus R over 2. Then we get, then omega is everything we just need to make sure omega is the right thing in order to follow the path. Because the linear velocity doesn't matter as much. I mean, it does a little bit, but whatever. If we make sure omega is the one following the path, then we can basically readjust our velocity constraints as to fit omega. So basically say, depending on what omega needs to be, we make the velocity constraint for V even tighter, and then we can ramp up V as one profile that we ramp up and down. Where this constraint is just, where this is just a constraint, and then we just compute what V and R or L and R need to be given the V. But we know that they are achievable because we make W a constraint. A lot of this is approximating over constraining, just to make sure the thing is doable. It might not be exactly optimal because we're doing some approximations and constraints, but it's good. The thing that this adds is it also changes your acceleration. You can't, this is unexpected, but if you devise it this way, when you accelerate, try to accelerate your linear velocity, the velocity of the omega velocity is fine to using the omega velocity constraints on V. It works, but it turns out that in some situations it will exceed the maximum acceleration. So we also account for that, but that's not super important. Basically, we rephrase this as linear velocity and omega rotational velocity.
And constraint omega.
Yeah, and then we sort of profile one thing instead of these two things because we just use omega as a constraint on V. Okay. Now, that's how we solve the right and left problem, synchronizing them. And the thing I hate about most other teams is they don't do this. This is math that probably is somewhere, but we haven't seen that we just derived. Most teams profile them individually, and that's why their splines are terrible.
Because it doesn't work, you can't profile them individually because of the acceleration problem?
Yes. I have talked to teams who have solved this in other ways. When they do error correction, they do error correction not only for the velocities of the wheels, but also the heading, which is a smart way to do it, which is cool. I really hope G4 does that. I don't see how they... Pathfinder doesn't do that, I don't think. But yeah. And we use that segmentation to approximate our target velocities to be these constant things at different sections. Okay. Once we have that, we can basically, we have our path, we have our target velocities, and we profile them such that we can ramp up and down as necessary as we follow the spline. Then we get basically our acceleration, velocity, and position at any moment in time. And that is what we output to the motors. We can say, at time t, we can tell the motor, we can use this to basically figure out what the velocity should be and what the acceleration should be. And we just tell the motor to do that, and the motor follows the path. That's as far as we got right now. So the thing is, the problem with this is that doesn't account for sensors. That doesn't account for error during driving. And that's kind of bad. The good thing about this is by motion profiling, we reduce a lot of the error. A lot of the error we end up getting in real life is just because we forget that velocity and acceleration constraints and jerk exist. And then when we try to make something do something, it won't do it because it's physically impossible. And then we have to account for error. So this theoretically should reduce a lot of the error, but there's still a lot of error from a bunch of parts in the process and like physical processes that we need to correct for. But as far as we got is generate the paths, generate the trajectories, which are basically, instead of having a position over this S, we generate a trajectory which is a desired velocity over time for each wheel, and we ramp those up using our constraints. So then we know exactly what each wheel is doing at any moment in time.
But instead of using S, we just use the arc length, right?
Yeah, we convert S to arc length, and
then we do the
match
graph
with time.
Yeah.
It's funky.
Okay.
So the ways in which we do this, that's not Eclipse. The ways in which we do this are basically just what I said. The thing is, I can get into exactly how we do it. Exactly how we do it might be wrong, because I have been starting to find errors in our code, a lot of them. And it's not, the parts of it are tested, but parts of it are kind of hard to test. So, the things we need to do are figure out the precise math that I didn't go over and make sure that we did it right in the code and be able to test it, maybe visualize it, maybe run on a robot. Because right now, what this code does is we have, given our constraints, like position, velocity, and acceleration, we'll make a spline. And I hope I've convinced you that we can make a spline because I showed you how we did it in Mathematica. Once we have a spline, we have to make a motion trajectory of it. And a motion trajectory, basically, it makes a bunch of segments of the spline, and it does this, it generates the segments, and it does this forward and backwards consistency that I was talking about. where it makes sure that your maximum possible velocity is informed by like if you need to decelerate sooner, you have to lower your maximum velocity at that segment. And then each segment is its own little microcosm that we can motion profile pretty easily, because it basically just has a starting velocity, an ending target velocity, and a maximum velocity, and that's pretty easy to
So we
profile.
just profile V and W off of that, and then set the values at that moment, and then keep going through every moment.
Yeah, so by splitting into segments, and making sure the segments are aware of each other and lowering their like possible velocities, then each segment is a very simple task to motion profile, relatively, and then we just do motion profiling on that by ramping up acceleration and doing all that stuff. Cool, and then once we have our trajectory segments, which with ramped up stuff, we generate a tick map, which basically just says any tick will, actually this is our tick map at the bottom of the screen right here, where my mouse is. A tick map is a map from any tick. A tick is like an amount of time, a very small amount of time, and it says exactly what the position, velocity, and acceleration need to be at that tick for each wheel.
So we just set those values, and now we're set. We do it for every spline, and we're okay.
Yeah, so we tell the motors to do that. Okay.
If it's an error, then we just ignore error.
Does this work?
So, does this work? That is an excellent question. We've never ran it on a robot. I've been finding bugs on it. We had a bug where it exceeded the maximum acceleration, which was 1, but right now it doesn't seem to be doing that. So I didn't want to run it on a robot yet. We can try running it on a robot. I'm finding more errors that are debugging as I go along.
Oh my god.
The things we need to do is run this on a robot, add error correction, which is a huge deal, because the reason we haven't added error correction yet is because all of this stuff is super careful with constraints for velocity and acceleration and smoothness. And error correction, basically all of error correction methods throw that out the window, and they say like PID doesn't have any built-in way to account for acceleration constraints or stuff like that. So what we should do is either find an error correction that can still be mindful of all these constraints we've been so careful to keep this whole process, or we make our own, or we throw away this nice, pretty trajectories that we made that fit all the constraints and all the make the motors do stuff nicely, and then we just use bad error correction to make it less smooth and not fit with the motors, but it will work probably. It'll just be more inaccurate and bad. Most importantly, bad. Bad error correction that doesn't take the stuff we took into account while making this is gross theoretically. The fact that every team in FRC that has splines uses it is irrelevant. But some teams have better error correction than others, and we can do things like heading error correction. That's another thing. If we do error correction, normally it would just be done on the wheels, but we want to make sure that the error correction doesn't desynchronize the wheels.
Wait, so what is error correction again?
Error correction is basically saying we have for every tick exactly where we want the wheel to be, how fast we want it to be moving, and what we want its acceleration to be. The problem is
I could be wrong.
The physical things are never precisely what you tell them to be. So we have sensors on the wheels that tell us what they're actually moving at. And if we're saying...
But the sensors aren't perfect.
Based on how it goes wrong?
Yes. So one thing we were thinking of doing, because we're segmenting the splines, a benefit of that is that if we get too far off, if our segment goes terribly wrong, we might be able to realign to future segments. We might be able to just generate a segment from where we are to the beginning of the next segment.
Okay, how long are the segments?
It's
extremely small.
You can choose.
Arbitrary one.
What is a good segment length?
I have no idea. I literally have no
What are
clue.
they right now?
They're based on they limit your curvature and your derivative curvature and the
It depends on
curvature.
what your spline will be.
Yeah, they're basically they're not meant to be lengthwise, but they're sort of like curvature-wise. They limit stuff.
Is there a problem with just recreating the segment until, from the
Yeah,
curve?
what if every time we just get de-aligned, like a spline from our current position?
So we thought about doing that. It's kind of gross. It's actually really gross and might work, but it doesn't account for drift errors and stuff like that. Like if we're just consistently driving too far to the right, by making a new segment, that's not going to solve the issue. It does solve other kinds of error though.
My computer.
Yeah. So basically, that is where splines are at. The code base is something that is commented, yet still daunting. It uses a lot of the math that I mentioned or didn't mention. It uses this paper, which is very nice and handy. Oh, here's a cool illustration of forward and backward consistency. Basically, if these are our planned velocities, our target maximum velocities, we can't actually reach them. We have to start at 0, and we have to end at 0. So we do a forward consistency check to make sure that we can reach them, that we go from each velocity up until the next one.
Why are the velocities moved down? Is it just like relative to other velocities?
So they move down because if this was our segmented maximum velocities, for each segment we have these dots for what's our target velocity. We can't reach the target velocity because our acceleration constraints are going to make us only be able to get this high up, this fast, in this amount of time, or in this case, in this amount of arc length. So basically, we can't actually reach this velocity because we have to start at 0.
Yeah.
We can't reach this velocity because we can only accelerate this much. So we do a forward pass to make sure we are accelerating. We are within our acceleration constraints, and then we do a backwards pass to make sure we're in our deceleration constraints.
What happens if we're not? Like, there are some dots that are impossible to reach.
Oh, well, we basically just lower them.
Oh, so lower them to the line, and so we just accelerate as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So once we segment it and we get each of our segment has one of these dots sorted associated to it because we have a constant target velocity in each segment.
Yeah.
More or less. Then we can do these backwards forward passes between the segments.
That's
and
not
then
too hard to implement, right? Is it or no?
it is implemented.
Okay.
And then it does the profiling. Don't worry about the math. This is like physics.
Oh no. Big square root sign.
Yeah, it doesn't have nice graphs for this, does it? Okay, well, anyways, most of this math we don't use. Some math is useful.
Constraint satisfaction.
Yeah. So basically, there's a lot of options to splines. There's a lot of possible paths you can choose, a lot of different kinds of splines. There's a lot of ways you can do profiling. We're just trying to get something that works and is beautiful, unlike gross code. And what we have is what I said. What we need is error correction, and we need to make good error correction.
How would you write error correction? Because like, how would you like determine the error in the sensor?
Well, basically, we have our desired velocity at a point, or something like that, and we can measure our velocity at a point using a sensor. And if our desired, or not our desired velocity, so sorry, our profiled velocity, what we say tell the wheel to be going at, that we say like you should be able to go at this speed. It doesn't end up going at that speed if it's going like a meter per second smaller, and we use error correction to like correct that difference. Things like PAD.
What do you
And
mean
also
by
the
correct that
angle of the
difference,
robot,
though?
right?
You mean by just like basically just adjust your forward backward passes? And
Well.
now it's no longer possible to reach like.
Oh, that's a great question. So the thing is, we sort of throw that out the window in some capacity. We don't really because this is accounting for motor constraints. The error should be minimal, and with good error correction, we should. I mean, we definitely should be staying roughly along the side of the path. We might exceed acceleration constraints by a very small amount. But basically, by creating this trajectory for the motors to go through that we know they should be able to do,
The motor shouldn't err ever.
then it will err a bit,
But not
even if,
significantly.
yeah. But even if the error correction does violate some of this stuff, it should just stay on it more or less.
How would you like approach error correction? That's a problem though.
That's what they're working on. Well, one solution is PAD. PAD can be really bad. And the thing is, for this, it's important that we have good error correction, because if we don't have good error correction, then we get misaligned in 2 dimensions and then everything sucks. Because if we get misaligned in 2 dimensions, it's really difficult to get back on path. So part of the thing we need for splines is good error correction. That's the biggest step. We also have to make sure that what we have until now works. Yes?
Do you think that for error correction, it might work to have, for like the current segment that the robot is driving along, you like recreate the segment, but you keep the start and end positions the same, we just adjust the spline so the current, like whatever we think the robot's position is, we like adjust the spline so it goes over that point, and maybe even add some correction, like in the opposite direction for the rest.
Yeah.
If someone implemented monkey see, monkey do, that basically the same thing as this. Like we just plot a path first, and then like
monkey see, monkey do is
just for controller input, right?
Yeah.
And then like if we're able to map that to like positions,
well,
wouldn't this essentially be a similar position map?
If we do that, then we can do it better than monkey see, monkey do. Rather than doing whatever the drivers actually drive, we can like go on a top-down view and like see exactly what path we want the robot to take, and we can tell it to do that.
Yeah.
Actually,
And drivers follow an imprecise path.
check this out. This is, I don't condone path cleaver, but it does have this cool visualizer.
So that's what they just use position relative, but position relative.
Is this it? Let me go to splines. There's a cool visualization that in this newly released library for splines. But okay, yeah, this is pretty sad. I don't actually know where it is, where the jar is. There we go. So yeah, monkey see, monkey do. We would, if you want to do that just for position, we want to have it autocorrectly follow the path. We don't actually need drivers to input that because drivers suck.
Or we just draw it or something.
Yeah.
Do something.
What was your question? Oh, the thing, Rohan, you were saying, I convinced myself a while ago that doesn't work because of things like drift. I'm not certain. It's definitely.
But like, what if we?
Bye.
What if we if we know like roughly like how far off the robot is from the intended path, we could in theory like alter the spline. Like if we kind of like split the spline in half, or not necessarily in half, we just split it into two parts where one part is the first part is the part that the robot has already like moved past, and the other part is the part that it still needs to travel. And maybe in theory you could adjust the second part to be in the like opposite direction of the drift, if we can actually like know that information.
I don't understand the opposite part thing.
So like,
yes.
If we have like so if like we have the robot here, right? They like make basically like a cut in here, and then this can, I don't know. Like this part will have to change, but the idea is that like you like recreate spline. Like alright. This spline kind of goes like this. It's weird to explain, but like this spline is readjusted in the sense that first it passes over the position that the robot like strayed into, but also it doesn't go. It no longer goes directly to the intended endpoint, but it kind of corrects. Like since we drifted right here or left here, it like adjusts the rest of the spline, so it's slightly
It was very good.
That makes sense. There's a thing called Gerber suit, which is an air friction which is a similar concept. Rather than regenerating a spline, it uses a circular path.
Or pulling your hair. This is the disadvantage of having long hair for all people.
People use.
You're down 2
And that could be great, yeah.
I guess you can pull my
I think
hair
that would
too,
make
but it'll hurt less.
Yeah.
It all hurt the same.
Okay, fine. I'll be able to get away
I think
from
we should
that.
definitely
I have less of a grip.
try add pure precision. I think this might be a lot more thing.
You did. You intentionally
For the same concept.
I did not.
It trains on the
How
Titan.
exactly does PID work in like
On
this
the Titan.
sense of like correcting
3 seconds, 3
just
seconds.
like the spline itself?
It's supposed to be like a lot faster.
So PD would be done
the software.
With the 10,000 layers and then
Wait, what are you working on?
sorry, with like 20 filters each.
That's
What
still
are you
pretty
working
good.
on? No, but like, what are you?
Pure pursuit.
PID is done on a one-dimensional layer.
Oh, you're working on.
So we would compress it into like one-dimensional. We do PID on the right wheel and left wheel, or like one for the wheel, one for the left wheel, or PID for the right wheel and left wheel, and account for heading.
What is this
Transfer that
for?
into left, right wheel, and left wheel outputs.
So we can run things on the
Then how would you
GPU.
set like a set point? What would the set point be? Just like the value wanted.
Yes. The set point is what
The
we.
target value.
Yeah.
Like the target motor, like
Yeah.
send value, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing we told the motor send the motors to.
Shoot, I just
We
changed
things
one
we
of their things and I'll
tell the
look
motors to
through.
do is our
Good
set
thing I
point,
can look
and we
in
use
here.
measure what they actually are.
Oh, why did it not print out? What if I did
Okay.
intelligence?
Sorry, that was a mess. That's what we have for splines right now. If you have, I see there's a lot of questions about
Yeah, I just-
what we could use, and that's what we need. We basically need to come up with ideas of what we want to use and then implement them and test them for error correction.
Wait, don't we need to
Yeah,
know
you would
to what
need to-
extent error correction would be a problem?
That's a great question. One thing that we can do is just try running this on a robot without any error
That's what I'm
correction.
saying. Don't we need to run
But
another
then
robot to
PID
see like?
PID by
Because it could be
itself
like
is
no problem.
relatively
Like, I doubt that's
simple.
true, but it could be like insignificant.
That's possible.
PID is relatively
I
simple.
doubt it, but that's something we wanted to do and then we just never did. Well, part of the reason is that Pinky didn't have any
hey,
coders.
Leo.
They didn't have the right motor controllers. But I'm trying to get the electronics team to put those on and stuff. So we should probably run that test. Yes.
Steven said
Um,
that he was going to reserve the first 30 minutes of today's meeting to talk about camera placement.
Oh, I didn't do that enough.
Today's meeting?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Regardless,
Well, I guess we have no
That's
say.
you, Osher. That's on our
Oh,
substitute
Rick.
leader.
He wasn't there at the beginning of the meeting.
is that why Shelly came in?
He was or was not?
He was not here at the beginning of the meeting. I didn't see him.
Okay, I'm gonna react with a thumbs down to that.
So,
then.
Regardless.
Broken heart.
Okay, if you have questions about what we can use, ask me. I might have some insight. I might not know anything about it.
What?
We might want to try it. If you have any questions about how the stuff we did do works, then ask me because we
Yeah,
need
wait,
to go over it
10
again. Because
Ooh,
our
that's
code
gonna be fun.
it seems to work, but we're not sure, and we have to go through all of it again and make sure it's right. Because I'm finding errors in it.
Does it get detected?
If you use
Okay,
pure
yeah.
pursuit, doesn't it result in like
Try.
continuity? Because like you're going around the path of a circle, but that could like make it a bad angle when you get to the end of the spline.
Thank you.
Oh right, yeah, pure pursuit will work this. Yeah, you're right. Pure pursuit does having as well, rather than just accounting for
Could
it.
still have it half an hour left.
Oh, but you're
PID,
thinking
do we have like an hour and a half?
You could pure pursuit and then just regenerate the entire path.
Yeah, that would be lame.
Still.
That would be like
Probably
doing.
Not
That would be not doing much more value. That would be saying take those lines and keep it pursuit. Yeah, that's not what you want.
Yeah.
How hard would PID be? Like, it wouldn't be that hard, right?
What?
Yeah, it wouldn't be that hard.
It's
It wouldn't be that hard to
Like besides
Yeah,
tuning.
yeah.
Tuning is
Dude,
hard.
why are we talking about tuning? We should do that with a neural network.
Yeah, we should
right?
do that with a neural network.
Dude, that would be so intelligent.
Wait. Have you tried using the output data and just like plotting the path of like a hypothetical vehicle?
So
programmers need anything.
I just
I'm very bored with
Hey, I'm just saying,
valuable design.
that's.
You could go interview for a minimum wage job, start working it, and then just give us the money made from it. No.
Also stab you in the face with a pencil.
I think one of those options is very productive.
I think one of those options is clearly more
Oh,
productive.
God, no,
Even I'm
please.
trying to manipulate
Okay,
physical objects.
All the code that we wrote, or all the code you guys wrote that might have.
You when I'm
errors in
trying to
it,
catch a
maybe
physical object that's spinning.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm good at
The
that
thing
one.
about visualizing, we haven't used to visualize because the thing is in Java. What we did is we programmed the identical stuff in Desmos and Mathematica, and we made sure that it works.
How do you implement it in
Well, we didn't do all of it in Desmos. We did the initial splines up in Desmos. And basically, we have tests outputs for sample points on the splines in Java. So we just make sure we're the exact same as the sample outputs in Mathematica, and then we can graph it there.
I don't know what that means.
You use my extra attachment.
You don't give it to me, I will annex you.
No. Yes, I can feel good, you know.
Peer pursuit. That's kind of
Improved peer pursuit algorithm. What the heck?
Oh,
is this?
improve peer pursuit.
What is this?
What's
Yeah.
that?
For autonomous driving advanced system.
What's improved? I know peer pursuit. I just don't know.
The
I'm
hottest
terrified. I felt my life
The
flash.
hottest research
I know it's
field.
terrifying.
Autonomous
It was a major need for realizing intelligent operating. Oh, blah, blah, blah.
Why would it-
I accept that, I accept
Waves.
your.
Why are there waves?
I'm not
Paper?
bullying you, okay?
Good argument.
You can play with the eraser.
I love playing with the eraser.
Excellent.
Calibrate the heading and
What
setting
did you
angle of the.
It's the Nueva waves.
Wow, that's it was
Both algorithm
wave,
could-
singular.
Calibrate heading
Now it is.
and setting
Come on,
angle.
this is a Nueva wave.
And reduce lateral
Go
error.
look at the paper. What's the diagram?